or the lack of elections. We're not quite sure whether we're having elections, whether it will be delayed for another year. Various parties are up to various attempts to delay it, but most of the country seems to want to have it this year, which most people believe is the correct time and constitutionally the correct time as well. And to discuss all this and more, we have with us this evening Mr. Tharaka Nanayakkara, Attorney at Law and Deputy Legal Secretary of the SJB. Welcome, Tharaka.
Thank you. Good evening to you.
Now, Tharaka, Mr. Donald Trump and the US election has been much in the news these days with the unfortunate assassination attempt adding a lot of drama. But one thing is for sure, the US has a set date for its presidential election. That's the 5th of November of this year. But in Sri Lanka, we don't know what our election date will be, or even if we're going to have an election at all, and if so, which election is it? Is it the presidential? Is it the general election, or both together? And at the same time, in the backdrop, we have the provincial councils, which we haven't had an election in goodness knows how long, and the fourth election, which is the local government election, again we haven't had it for a long time. So all these elections just buzzing around, and it's very confusing to everyone. What would you have to say about this scenario?
Neeraj, now as you pointed out, the local government election was declared to be held about a year ago, and the government cited the lack of funds and managed to do a googly on the
It seems to have funds
mandate
for a lot of other things.
Exactly. So and that has been pushed aside for now, but there are pending litigation regarding the undue postponement of the local government elections and so on. However, the burning issue at this point is the presidential election, because as we know, on the 19th of November 2019, the president was elected, and the tenure of a president is 5 years according to this constitution of Sri Lanka, the current constitution, and we have to have essentially a president in power by that time, 2024. And today is a very interesting day. Today is the day where the Elections Commission, which is an independent commission having constitutional authority, could declare the date of the elections. So as people who uphold the franchise of the general public, sovereignty of the people and democracy, we expected the Elections Commission to make a declaration today, or at least tomorrow, on the date of the elections. But on my way to your studio, we heard a statement by the chairman of the Elections Commission, say that to the effect that they will take a few days to declare the date of the elections. So we hope that the Elections Commission would exercise its constitutional functions, constitutionally assigned functions, and declare the date of the presidential election immediately, because that is democracy. Holding elections in a timely manner and fashion is an essential part of democracy. And we have seen instances where political leaders have sought to delay or postpone elections. Madam Bandaranaike's case is a case on point. In 1975, the general elections were due, but she cited the non-aligned summit and various other reasons and postponed the elections to 1977. The result was that if in 75 the elections were held, she would have got defeated anyway, but the majority the opposition got after 2 years of delay in elections was a super majority of 5/6. So there's plenty of lessons in history for any political leader to guide themselves not to delay elections, and we hope and pray, we expect the incumbent president and the elections commission, the incumbent president not to stand in the way of an election, and the elections commission to properly declare the election and hold the elections.
Now, Tharaka, the elections commission, as you said, is supposed to be independent. So the presidency is one part of government, the elections commission is another part, and they basically don't have much to do with each other, or that's what an independent commission is supposed to mean. But in this case, there's this lingering doubt whether the elections commission is coming under undue pressure, and it doesn't seem to do itself any favors by delaying, even for a few days or a week or two, the announcement of the dates of nominations, because after all, they can't say that the election is a surprise. It's been coming for nearly 5 years now. We knew that. So it's not a snap election. So what are your thoughts about this undue delay, which is keeping the entire population in suspense?
Yeah, I think elections commission has a principal duty, owes its principal duty to the people of this country, who are the holders of the sovereign power of Sri Lanka in terms of the constitution. So I feel that the elections commission should come forward and declare the date for the elections as a matter of priority, because the chairman of the commission was heard to say that there are certain other extraneous factors to be considered, whether it's a holiday, whether to avoid the holidays, to find the most convenient day, and to give the parties enough time to campaign, and to even find auspicious times. Now that is, I believe, a bit of a stretch when it comes to the functions of the elections commission. So I would like to, as the SJB, we would like to call upon the elections commission to immediately declare the date of the election, so that the democracy of this country, the very rich democracy of this country, is protected, and the people are given the opportunity to exercise the sovereign right of electing their next president.
Well, I don't know what your opinion is on this, but I personally don't like having some astrologers deciding on election dates or times or whatever. That seems rather silly in this day and age, especially I believe it was President Mahinda Rajapaksa who listened to the wrong astrologer and ended up being booted out of office. And the other thing is, holidays should have no bearing on this at all. This is the most important day in 5 years, whether it's this election or in the next 5 years or whatever. It is the most important day where we choose the president. So the day being a holiday shouldn't really matter, should it?
Yeah, I also think, Nilesh, that all the other extraneous considerations are secondary, because as you very correctly pointed out, this election is the need of the hour, because we have to look at this aspect. The incumbent president, His Excellency Ranil Wickremesinghe, is essentially a caretaker president. He expended the balance of the tenure of Gotabaya Rajapaksa, the president who unceremoniously resigned and left office halfway through his term, and Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe got elected not through the public mandate, but of course through the constitutional provisions, but by 134 votes of parliamentarians. So therefore it is even more pressing, the need of the election is even more pressing, given the fact that the president we have is not democratically elected president by the people who exercise their franchise. Therefore the need is even more pressing, and we can't emphasize enough that the elections must be declared and elections must be held democratically and peacefully on a date that is to be fixed soon, hopefully.
Now this meddling with the term of the presidency or of parliament seems to be something of a habit. As far as I can recall, Tharaka, you referred to Mrs. Bandaranaike's United Front government. delaying by 2 years. Then we had President J.R. Jayawardena's referendum, rather infamous referendum, which scrapped the election altogether. Then we had President Chandrika Kumaratunga. There was a bit of a controversy over which day she had actually been sworn into office, and then it turned out that she was sworn in twice for the same office, and one of those was in private, and finally that also went to the Supreme Court. Then we had President Mahinda Rajapaksa also, who called the election early, so there was a controversy over that date. And then President Sirisena's term also, which was originally intended to be 6 years, and then the constitution was amended and made 5 years, but when it came to the actual election year, again there was a controversy whether it's 5 or 6, and it was decided it's 5. So we seem to have a habit, or our leaders seem to get into this habit of trying to meddle around with 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, or whatever.
Yes, Niresta, now the problem is when you are in power, you must do what you have to do from day one. Now our leaders, our elected presidents, unfortunately play for time, play for the satisfaction of their cadres, their political supporters, and then in the last year only they realized they have not created any legacy except few presidents. So then they try to extend their term or make some other arrangement to be in power for a longer period, particularly when there is doubt as to whether they could get elected. Now if you take President Kumaratunga's example, this fiasco happened in her second term because constitutionally under the 18th amendment that was prevalent by then, only 2 terms that a single president could, individual president could be elected only for 2 terms. So she had completed a second term, so then she wanted to see whether she could stay for another 1 more year. So likewise, President Mahinda Rajapaksa, he had amended the constitution to be elected any amount of times, and after the second term was over, before the second term was over, he called an election prematurely, if I am not mistaken, in the hope that he could be elected for the 3rd time. So it went wrong. So all these political calculations are to somehow try and go through the loopholes of the law, and I believe democratic leadership should not be that petty to look through loopholes of the constitution, perceived loopholes of the constitution to extend their power, because democracy is the will of the people, and if you as a politician, as a president, or at a lesser level is confident about what you have done and about the affection and the support that you have from the general public, you wouldn't worry much in going to an election. Or for instance, SJB being the principal opposition party, we are very much eager to contest these elections, to have these elections, and now there is a bit of a story going around that there might be a snap general election. So whatever the election that comes, as a political party we are ready. I believe that is what political leadership should be, and that is how leaders should do politics. So in our case we are ready for any election, but we are awaiting a presidential election because that is a constitutionally mandated election for now, and I hope the incumbent president and the elections commission would act accordingly.
Now we seem to be lingering on this 5 years or 6 years issue for the last several months, even though the Supreme Court has in the past few weeks ruled twice on the matter that it is 5 years, but now the cabinet passed something else which is intended to go as an amendment to the constitution, which may require a referendum. So there's a lot of confusing and I would call it tinkering with the constitution and the constitutional processes. But the fact is, Tharaka, that we have had two administrations which went by the 5-year rule. The first one was the Sirasa regime, that was 5 years, and the second one was, of course, when President Gotabaya Rajapaksa was elected. We all knew it was for 5 years. I mean, President Gotabaya never said it's for 6 years. So, I mean, had he stayed on in power, in office rather, he would right now be campaigning for his second term, rather than be trying to go on for 6 years, don't you think?
Yeah, now this whole controversy is about Article 83B of the Constitution, whereas the 19th and the 20th amendments, whereas the 21st amendment reduced the term of the president to 5 years, set the term of the president to 5 years, Article 30, subsection 2, and the term of the parliament to 5 years by Article 62. However, a particular clause, that is 83, Article 83B, which is an older provision, which provides for a mechanism to extend the term of the parliament or the president beyond 6 years, has not said law must be given a purposeful interpretation, and as you said, the intention of the legislature at the time of drafting this amendment or passing this amendment was clearly to reduce the term of the president and the parliament to 5 years. That is obvious, it's on paper, it's printed in clear black lettering. So therefore any administrative oversight in failing to amend a corresponding provision would never hold water in any court of law anywhere in the world. That is why I was very confident. I think we discussed a few weeks ago on your program about the possibility or attempts in people going to court challenging the tenor or the 19th Amendment, whether it was properly passed and all that. That is why I always very confidently say the law will be interpreted purposefully, and it would not give an interpretation which would become an absurdity. So therefore it's very clear, and Supreme Court has within a span of I think a week or 10 days have determined twice, and I think that has put the matter to rest. And constitutionally the term of the president is 5 years, and to his credit, President Ranil Wickremesinghe had also, I don't know whether it was after the horses had bolted, but then he declared that in his understanding also the term is 5 years. So therefore there is no problem. I mean, even the incumbent president is conceding that his term is 5 years, so there's absolutely no problem. We will have the elections.
But Tharaka, we still don't know the election date. We don't even know the month. It could be in September, it could be in October. Is there any one person in Sri Lanka today who knows what the election date will be? Is it the Elections Commission? Is it the President? Or is it the President's astrologer? Who is it?
I think
if he has one.
Answer you would want me to say is the astrologer, but then I would think it's totally in the hands of the chairman of the Elections Commission and the members, the 3 members of the Elections Commission, because as we discussed earlier, by midnight on the 16th of July, the Elections Commission is empowered to decide the date. So the chairman of the commission has heard to say that he has to consider several factors, including astrological considerations. All that homework could have been done a month ago if he really wanted to, and I think it's the sacred supreme duty of the Elections Commission and its chairman to declare the day of the elections. That is a simple matter, very simple matter, and all this planning, because everybody knows, including you, myself, even 8th grader knows that elections are due, presidential elections are due before 19th of October this year. So therefore they should have done their homework. They can't be putting an entire country on pins, and it is their duty, and I hope they comply with their statutory duty and declare the date of the elections ASAP.
Now, I don't know the exact context of this astrology business as far as elections go and this election, but surely whoever needed to consult an astrologer could have done so last week instead of waiting till after the 17th. As far as I know, the Elections Act does not prevent anyone, including the Commission, from going to an astrologer whenever they wanted to, if that is
Certainly
indeed the
not.
case. And I, no offense to the members of the Commission, who are very honorable men, I believe. By the way, we did invite the chairman of the Elections Commission to appear on our talk shows here at Newsfirst, but we were politely told that the chairman does not appear on talk shows, so that is his choice. But what that means is that we can't put these questions to him on behalf of our audience and the nation in a political talk show. Of course, he does have press conferences from time to time. Now, Tharaka, how prepared is the SJB for this election and for a general election and the other 2 elections?
Nilesh, I think as a political party we have done our homework, not like the Elections Commission. We have been preparing for a presidential election and also have been considering the possibility of a snap general election, which is minimal right now, because this management of the time between 2 elections is going to be a very difficult process for the Treasury and for the Elections Commission both. So therefore we assume that it will be the presidential election that we are facing first. We've done our hard groundwork. We've organized our political grassroots level organizations from the Grama Niladhari division level, from the polling booth level up to the administrative district level and at the national level. Right now we are holding district conferences of our candidate Honorable Sachit Premadasa, the leader of the opposition, which are extremely successful, which are attended by tens of thousands of people, as you would have seen last few days. And I think a lot of survey reports have also declared Mr. Premadasa is well ahead of his competition as at to date, and we are tirelessly preparing and executing our plan to emerge victorious in these elections, not for the sake of our political victory, but because we believe we have a team that can bring Sri Lanka out of its economic misery.
Thank you very much. We are in conversation with Mr. Tharaka Nanayakkara of the SJB. We will be right back after a short commercial break. Don't go away.
Culture and tradition, a celebration and an offering, all for a good cause. Sirasa Namami Pinsara Samadhiya on Asala Full Moon Poya Day, live from the Kataragama Kiriwera premises, from 6 a.m. onwards on Sirasa TV. Join us, dressed in white.
Rata Tota Pita Rata Watta Pita Hamadeva Hamadamat Inna Danaganna Ude Atesita Eka Venaturu Eka Digata Ruat Paya Pahak Aherenna TV1 Samada Newsfirst morning on TV1. Julie Atale, Santuda Sita.
2024 ජූනි 15 වෙනිදා මොණරාගල ටෙම්වත්ත ශාස්ත්‍රාලෝක කනඩු විදුහලේ දරුවන්ගේ විවිතුරු දියබිඳක සීනේ සැබෑ කරමින් ප්‍රති ආශ්‍රිත ජල පිරිපහදු ඒකකයට මුල්ගල තැබේ. කම්මැද්ද රට නගන ජනපෞර
Sujata Vidyalaya, Matara, Vidyartha College, Kandy, Ibbagama Central College, Kurnagala, educationist and author.
TB Langarat.
The answer is correct. European Ratahi Jantika Pushpe Ve.
Ukrainian.
The answer is correct. Mohu Pakistani Agamati Lisam Teri Patpia.
Shehbaz Sharif.
Correct.
Always have a dream, realistic dream. So you have to work towards that.
The journey of 1,000 miles begin with simple single steps. Brainbusters with Slits Season 4, Saturday at 6:30 p.m. on TV1.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are in conversation with Mr. Tharaka Nanayakkara, Attorney at Law and Deputy Legal Secretary of the SJB. Now, Tharaka, we were speaking about the preparedness of the SJB to face a snap general election. Could you enlighten us a little bit more about this? Because from what is expected by political analysts, the SJB would be expected to increase the number of MPs it has in Parliament by a considerable number. Whether it will get a majority or not, we will see, but quite a considerable number from what it has right now. So tell us about the new faces that we can expect to see.
Nilesh, to be very frank, I think we are still expecting a presidential election and not a general election, but that is not to say that we are unprepared for a general election, because as you would have seen, we've been forming a very wide alliance, political alliance, sometimes with certain politicians who are slightly outside the standard spectrum of the SJB policies. But as I always say, who joins our alliance, not the SJB as a political party, but who joins the Samagi Jana Sandhanaya wider alliance, are joining us not on their principles, not on their political beliefs, but by accepting the political, economic and social policies of the SJB, because we believe in a social market economy. We believe in the state intervention to ensure fairness, and also we believe in the market forces being permitted to compete freely. So these are our economic policies, and our leader, Honorable Sajid Premadas, is a strong believer of social welfare, social equity and social justice, which we are hoping to achieve by having a very strong social safety net. But that doesn't mean to say that we are going to dole out money, dole out 10 kilos of rice throughout our 5 years, but we are going to, our plan is to empower people. So to answer your question, that I feel in a general election, if it is a snap general election as you just said, there'll be a lot of new faces. There'll be, obviously, I think it's very apparent that SJB will get a very clear majority if it is a general election, and right now we only have 50 odd parliamentarians, so when it goes up to 113, the rest would be new faces. So we have professionals, we have environmentalists, we have women, we have young leaders. I don't want to name names because it's quite a bunch we have, and a competitive bunch. We don't know who would make it, because it's a representative democracy. It's not the first past the post system, so within the party also everyone will be competing for a seat. So therefore it will be a very fresh government, very fresh SJB government, and lot of if you are looking at the cabinet, there will be a lot of new faces, young faces, along with the experienced hands who have sufficient experience and understanding to deliver in a crisis as which Sri Lanka is facing right now.
Now, how does it work, the nominations within the party? How tell us how the democratic process works within the SJB. Who decides? Let's just take a district, Anuradhapura district. Obviously, you have a whole bunch of people who are SJB members who are working for your party within that Anuradhapura district, but you would presumably have more such members than can be nominated. So how does it work? Who decides? Is it decided out there in Anuradhapura? Is it decided here in Colombo? Is it decided by the leader alone, or by the working committee, or by whom?
Anyway, it's a very interesting point. Now Sri Lanka has 160 odd electorates, which are divided into 22 electoral districts. So SJB as a political party has a chief organizer for each of these electorates, and essentially that particular organizer of an electorate would be a candidate, because if you take the Galle district for an example, you have 10 electorates and the list would consist of 12 candidates. So you have room for those 10 organizers as well as 2 others who would probably represent different ethnicities, different religious beliefs. So that allocation for the organizer is already made, the chief organizer is already made, and there is space to accommodate a few others also in every district. So I don't see any potential problems there. So if traditionally what we do is, even if required, there can be an interview board, a nomination interview board, but as I said, since there is an allocation for the candidate already and we've decided on the candidates on most areas, that might not be necessary, except places where there is competing persons who are from the SJB for the same seat.
And speaking of new faces, what about young people, professionals? How many of those would we see in the new parliament from your party?
Yeah, so now as of now, Nilesh, I can tell you we have appointed several young lawyers one or two doctors, some environmentalists, women's rights activists as organizers, few people who are qualified in economics as organizers, so they'll be running for the elections. And also we can't forget the national list, the 29 nominations for the national list, which is essentially designed to bring in professionals who may not be able to muster the support of the general public in their first elections, to bring in some of the brightest people of the nation to the parliament. But then these have been misused very badly. We have seen people, I don't want to name names, but certain people who have been nominated by the national list. But I believe Honorable Sajid Premadasa would keep up with the spirit of the national list this time and nominate
So even the national list, who decides on that, the nominations?
So the end of the day, the national list and the nomination papers, everything signed by the General Secretary of the party, but it is often and always in consultation with the party leader and the working committee of the party, which is the apex administrative body. So it's a collective decision.
Okay. And let's talk about women's representation, which is a dire need in our parliament from all parties. What's the SJB doing about that?
So we are now in the local government level. Of course, there's a mandatory provision for women's representation, and that has been
That's 25%.
And now SJB has always been concerned about giving more representation to the youth and the women in other political arenas, provincial councils and parliament as well. So we have quite a few female candidates who will be coming forward these elections, and also I believe already we have proposed 15% quota for the youth.
Now when you say youth, Tharaka, what's your definition? Because in comparison to some of the members of parliament who are in their 80s, even a 60-year-old might be considered as youth.
What we mean here is under 35 years of age, the standard
under
definition
35.
of
Okay, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Just clarifying that situation.
Of course,
Yes. Another question I have, and this is for actually all political parties, but I hope you'll address it on behalf of your party, is the experience factor. We haven't had provincial polls or local government polls in quite a while. So we don't have elected members in our 9 provinces or in the hundreds of local government institutions. The Pradeshia Sabhas, the municipal councils, the urban councils. So these would normally be the training ground in governance for young politicians, whether they're young or older, but those who come in with no experience, they would cut their teeth in these institutions, first preferably local government, and then move on to provincial, and then come into parliament. But is it a concern this time that you may have people who will go straight into parliament, and you may have to make them cabinet ministers or state ministers or what have you? Then what happens then?
Well, unless I beg to disagree with you on that point, because experience in governance can come in different ways. It can be from local government or provincial councils and then work their way up to the parliament, or it can be a professional who had already, say, run a commercial establishment, or who has headed a government department, or who has been an entrepreneur who has certain set of skills. So the experience can be very widespread. It need not particularly be political experience at the grassroots level, but I don't disagree with you that it could be an added qualification. And essentially the greater issue here is that now the local governments have been functioning through commissioners, municipal councils through commissioners, and local authorities, Pradesh Sabhas, through secretaries of the council, who are not even in very high executive grades of the government public service. So this is a job that is to be run by democratically elected officials for a reason. Because if you take local authorities, local councils, they are the first line of interaction with the general public. If you have a problem with a blocked drain, or if your street light is not functional, or if your roadways are filled with potholes, you run to the local authority, you run to your local councillor. So now these people are defunct. These authorities are defunct in as much as democracy is concerned. It's run by secretary, and people who are the electors and people who are the taxpayers do not have the same level of access to these officials as they would have to their local councillors. That is one issue. B, if you take the provincial councils, an unelected governor is exercising all the powers of the chief minister and the provincial cabinet of ministers on his own, and that governor is a representative of the president, unelected. Therefore, I would say does not have any democratic mandate, which is fine. With the position of the governor as it's constitutionally intended, need not be democratically elected, but the function that they are performing right now, the function of the chief minister, function of the minister, because statutorily when the provincial council is defunct, the Provincial Councils Act provides for the governor to take over those powers. So it leaves room for a lot of political favorations, political interference in the democratic process, in the public activities. As we saw a few weeks ago, a particular governor of a province had appointed former local authority chairman as his representatives to supervise development activities. So this is a covert means of empowering your own catchers, your own cronies. So these things cannot happen in a democratic state, and unfortunately we've seen this, and we must of course commend the Elections Commission for coming forward and requiring the governors to annul those appointments, which they did. In fact, we were drafting papers to challenge all this by writ application as SJB, but I think those appointments have been scrapped right now. So, but these are the ill effects of a lack of democracy, because some people might say when Gotabaya Rajapaksa came into power, people said every district can have a brigadier, every electorate can have a colonel, and then the president can run the country. So we saw what it came to. So a country cannot function properly without democratically elected political leadership. That is a fact, and therefore we come back to the square one, or our initial issue of having timely elections, I suppose.
Well, the governors themselves are appointed by the president, so clear political appointments there, which are not in the best interests of democracy when it comes to an election. Now, Tharaka, let's assume and we hope that the presidential election is going to be held by November, and then or October rather, and then let us assume that if your party leader Mr. Sajith Premadasa wins the presidency, how soon would he dissolve Parliament? Has this been discussed in the SJB?
Yeah, I think any party who becomes victorious in the presidential elections would immediately dissolve the Parliament. That would be the same. Same decision would be taken by Mr. Sajith Premadasa as well if he becomes president, because a president needs president comes into power with a fresh mandate, and you can't function with a parliament which has a mandate that has expired. Particularly, this parliament has a very
dubious mandate.
Yeah, dubious mandate of almost 2/3 for SLPP, who will not even secure 20% in the next elections perhaps. So therefore it is essential that Parliament is dissolved and a fresh election is held, so as to give effect to the will of the people, the sovereignty of the people.
So that process of course would take about 3 months more, so we are looking at possibly a general election around January, am I correct?
Possible, yes.
Okay, and I hope that that is not dependent on astrology and holidays and so on. But we never know in this country. Now, what about the other elections? You mentioned the provincial council and the local government. How soon would we have those? I presume that the general election would be the first one after the presidential, but what about the other two?
Yeah, as of now, Nilesh, local government election is right now in the cards. We are technically in an election term. That is why the Elections Commission could step up and warn certain governors to rescind those appointments.
And the nomination lists are valid.
Still valid, but we might have to take a call on whether those nomination lists could be depended upon for a lot of practical reasons. However, our policy is to have the elections. Essentially, the local government and provincial council elections that have been delayed for, I believe, over 6 years has to be held, and it will be held as soon as the presidential is over. It will be a general election, of course, and thereafter all the elections that have been unduly postponed shall be held within a reasonable time frame.
Now, Tharaka, each election costs about 10 billion rupees. That's basically the cost of the staffing. So many hundreds of thousands of government servants are drafted in to man the various polling centers and counting centers and so on. Plus there is quite a bit of expenditure on security, where both the armed forces and the police especially are concerned. Then you also have other costs like the ballot paper itself. It's very costly, and also you have the transportation costs and a variety of other costs which are borne by the state, and I'm not even talking about the costs for each party. So wouldn't it make sense to have as many of these elections at the same time, on the same day, as possible? So for example, obviously the presidential should happen on its own. That seems to be the general consensus, but then the other three perhaps could be worked off on the same day.
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting suggestion. That is taking into account our economic difficulties more than anything else. There might be a few statutory amendments to be made, but I think that is not impossible, and I think that's something we should all consider, because end of the day we are in a huge economic crisis. It's just that we are in a temporary comfort zone where we are not repaying our debt. We've restructured about 35% of our debt, whereas about 60 to 65% we still don't know when we will have to pay. So it's a huge uphill task for any president who's coming into power, and it is a matter to consider, and I think we would duly consider all those implications.
Now, has the SJB decided on a possible cabinet? And of course it matters a lot who's going to be the finance minister, who's going to be the Minister of Health, the Minister of Education, and so on and so forth. Has there been any decision on these?
Yeah, well, the key position I believe is the position of the finance minister more than anything. I think Honorable Sajid Premadasa has already made a public statement that Dr. Harsha De Silva would be his choice for that position, which we all happily agree upon. And I think the other roles will be considered. We wouldn't want to. We have allocated responsibility, though we have not appointed a shadow cabinet. We allocated responsibility of, say, agriculture, media, certain aspects to certain MPs and potential MPs. And I don't think there will be any issues in determining the cabinet once Mr. Premadasa is in power. It will be a very scientifically subjects it will be cabinet where subjects are scientifically and properly allocated, without making a mockery of the system where one person is the Minister of Agriculture and Sports. It won't be that. That I can assure you.
You won't have any strange combinations.
We won't have strange combinations. We will have a methodical, strategically beneficial cabinet.
And what about the post of Prime Minister? And I ask that because, of course, we have seen on several occasions in Sri Lankan history where something happened to the president and the prime minister had to serve out the rest of the term. We saw that with President Ranasinghe Premadasa, who was unfortunately assassinated, and Prime Minister D.B. Wijayatunga had to be sworn in and served for a couple of years as president, caretaker president. And then of course we have the present situation where President Gotabaya Rajapaksa unceremoniously resigned, and
his prime minister also resigned.
Yes, his prime minister also did, but before he himself resigned the presidency, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe was appointed prime minister, so and then took on the presidency. So this kind of succession is very important. So what about the PM?
Nilesh, now our system is quite different to the American system, where there's a presidential candidate and a vice presidential candidate, a running mate. We don't have a running mate. We don't need a running mate for the reason that the prime minister is there. I believe in the US system the vice president is appointed by the victorious candidate, whereas in our system prime minister is the member of parliament who commands the majority support in the opinion of the president. So system is different. We will be having elections soon, so we don't have any competition within our ranks for the number 2 job. Our whole attempt, our whole effort goes on to win these elections. As I said earlier, and as I always say, it's not only to be proud to say that okay, we won this election. That's not the case. These are not going to be a bed of roses for any elected party who's coming to power. So we understand the difficulties we will face. We understand the difficulties that the general public are facing as of now. So we have a good team, and it'll be a teamwork led by Honorable Sajid Premadasa, but it'll be a teamwork, not a one-man show. And none of us are concerned, and none of our leadership are concerned about their personal positions. It's a matter of delivering Sri Lanka out of this crisis, nothing else.
We focused a lot on the constitution. Any further constitutional amendments which the SJB is thinking of? Right now the cabinet seems to want another amendment. God forbid, we've had so many amendments, I can't even remember exactly how many and when and what they were for. If you ask a member of the parliament, a typical member, what the 14th amendment was, he or she probably couldn't tell us. So any more surprises from the SJB side?
There won't be any surprises from our side, unless that I can assure you. If there are amendments that are required, it will follow a process of public consultation and proper judicial, proper legal vetting and procedurally correct way of presenting an amendment. We are not intending to bring any amendments to the constitution for our political benefit. We depend on the mandate of the people. Therefore whatever that comes won't be a surprise, that much I can assure you.
And I'm afraid we're almost out of time, and my final question, Tharaka, is we have seen this present regime bring in all kinds of new bills to Parliament very, very quickly and trying to rush them through, and several have got rushed through with very little consultation with other political parties and with almost no consultation with the public and other responsible stakeholders. Would an SJB government change this scenario? Would we see a proper process set in motion where any discussions with regard to such bills would be held over several months and involve all the stakeholders?
Yeah, that depends on how urgent a particular bill is to begin with, if and how much bearing it has on the public life now. For instance, if there's economic urgency, if there's a urgency for national security, you can't be having all this consultative process there, so long as that's not a part of the constitutional procedure or the legally laid out procedure. But if it is a matter of public importance, of course I believe we should engage in public consultation within a particular framework of time. And I think SJB, I believe that SJB has entrenched in at its heart that we have to go by the rules, we have to play by the rules, so it will be within the standard framework for bringing in any law.
To play by the rules and not to keep trying to change the rules at the whims and fancies of those in office, because they are in office and not in power. And with that, I'm afraid we have run out of time. My thanks to Mr. Tharaka Nanayakkara, Attorney at Law and Deputy Legal Secretary of the SJB. Thank you very much for spending the time with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you very much to you at home for watching. Don't go away, the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.